matter what's going on in my life, how busy I am, I will always make time for books. So when I needed to figure out how to escape hustle culture and become less of a workaholic, what did I do? I went to books. I read my way out. Some of them were good, a lot of them were bad. You shouldn't waste your time with the bad ones, and so I'm here to share the good ones. Hello, I am Brittany, a lifelong bookworm and founder of workbrighter.co. We are a digital media company and community that helps you escape hustle culture, redefine productivity, and find a better balance between work, rest, and play. And here are the books that helped me shake my workaholism. Because just 4 years ago now, I was such a workaholic that given my chronic illness and health issues, it was literally killing me. Obviously, I didn't see that at the time, but that's what it was. The reason that I'm so outspoken against hustle culture now is because of how dangerous it was for me when I was still really deep in it. When my workaholism was at its peak, when I was hustling as hard as I could, I had a day job and 3 or 4 different side hustles, depending on how you defined and divided them. And you know what I did when I realized that I was sleeping 5 hours a night? I started blogging more because I was convinced that I could get by on just 4. And I was in a very privileged position where I was living with my partner, my day job was paying me enough, and I had health insurance. I didn't need to side hustle. I was just convinced that working more, having more businesses, making more money would help me prove myself or something. But even for a healthy person, sleeping 4 hours a night and working the other 20 hours a day is not sustainable for very long. And guess what? I'm not a healthy person. I have a heavy smattering of physical disabilities, chronic illnesses, mental illnesses, behavior disorders, the whole gamut. And that means that for me to do my best, which is literally all any of us can do, I needed to pay a whole lot less attention to my work responsibilities and a lot more attention to my responsibilities to my own body and brain. And it did take several years of work. That work involved a lot more challenging things than just reading books, some pretty heavy therapy sessions. But a few years later, I truly feel most of the time like I am not a workaholic. I am a leisure queen. Leisure queen! And along with all of that therapy and other works, here are some of the books that helped. The first one is Rest: Why You Get More Done When You Work Less by Soojung-Kim. And I read this one for the first time during what I like to call my self-care sabbatical when I first left full-time work, and I really wasn't sure if I was going to be able to work anymore and was dealing with a lot of identity stuff around that. But while reading this book, I finally accepted that rest, which is what I was doing on that sabbatical, rest is work. It is a job to be done in and of itself, and it has value in and of itself. And so once I read this, I stopped feeling guilty for most of the time that I was spending not working, especially if I was spending that time resting or doing something to take care of myself. And I finally started understanding what I had previously diagnosed as laziness in myself. And I'm now fully convinced that laziness does not exist. That's a conversation for another video. Let me know in the comments if you want to see it. In reality, what a lot of us describe as laziness is actually needed rest. Because as this book says, you cannot work well without resting well. It backed up everything about rest, relaxation, energy management, productivity, all that stuff that I had kind of experienced with my own experiences at work, but didn't fully understand. And since I didn't fully understand it, I couldn't explain it or prove it to people, including myself. But in this book, Soojung-Kim has tons of evidence, studies, stories going back hundreds and hundreds of years. And so we've got the proof now. You really see how a lot of the people that society considers some of the world's most creative and innovative people worked a lot less than we realize, and they rested a lot more. The most compelling claim for me personally, Lin-Manuel Miranda. Lin-Manuel Miranda came up with the idea for Hamilton while he was reading a biography on vacation and forcing himself, only somewhat successfully, to unplug from work. AKA, without rest, without relaxation, Hamilton the musical would not exist. I don't want to live in a world without some of those lyrics. But really, this book convinces you that rest is a skill. Rest is work, and it's one that we all need to improve upon. I have so many many favorite quotes from this book that I literally have a whole page of them in my bullet journal that I try to read over as much as possible just because they're reminders that I constantly need. But if I had to pick like one of my favorites, it would be: creative people don't engage in deep play despite their high levels of activity and productivity. They're active and productive because of deep play. The second book that I want to talk about is Burnout: The Secret to Unlocking the Stress Cycle by Doctors Emily and Amelia Nagoski. That's right, Dr. Sisters. How badass. Burnout looks at a lot of the similar principles and discussions that are brought up in Rest, but, and this is what really made it relevant to me, especially a few years ago, is that Burnout specifically looks at this conversation through the lens of women and people who society treats and socializes as women, and specifically in the US, specifically in the 21st century, in the aftermath of the 2016 presidential election. Oof. That's when I was reading this, and so it was helpful. And it acknowledges something that too many self-help books for women are afraid to do. Acknowledge the patriarchy. Patriarchy. Ugh, that's a joke from the book. You'll get it if you read it. And it just makes all of the difference, because instead of acting like you are the problem and you are the reason you're burnt out, it does touch on all of the different systems that are contributing to the problem outside of ourselves, like patriarchy. Burnout is an amazing combination of self-help, humor, and social analysis, like everything I love. And both of the doctors Nagoski each pull on their own experiences and professions and background with different stories, and it's really enjoyable. They also strike the perfect balance, at least for me, of seriousness and sarcasm and humor and what can we do about all this except joke. And it just makes the topics of reading about burnout and oppression less depressing to read about because there's some good jokes in there. Overall, reading it just felt like a huge, long sigh of relief that I really needed to let out at the time. My favorite quote from this one is, "Your body, with its instinct for self-preservation, knows on some level that human giver syndrome is slowly killing you. That's why you keep trying mindfulness and green smoothies and self-care trend after self-care trend." Right? The third book that I found and that has helped me so much is Overwhelm: How to Work, Love, and Play When No One Has the Time. And this one is by Brigid, Schulte. I'll be honest, this one isn't as easy of a read. Maybe queue up something light for afterwards because it does get depressing. But it was definitely interesting and important to look at burnout and overwhelm from a more global and less time specific, I guess is the word, perspective than what I was reading in Burnout. And it definitely helps put the more recent and more specific stuff in Burnout into a more global context. It was so interesting to look at overwhelm as a global epidemic and the different ways that different countries and societies have tried to deal with it. I loved learning about the countries that started having an overwhelm problem, but they actually did something about it before it got really bad, unlike the US. It helps give us some ideas for what we could be doing here. And most importantly, this book helped me understand that I wasn't alone in this whole feeling perpetually overwhelmed and having frequent burnout. It helped me fully understand deep down that burnout is not an individual failure. The fact that so many people are getting burnt out so consistently is a societal failure. And so one of my favorite quotes from Overwhelmed was, "When women began working in a man's world, their lives changed completely. Yet workplace cultures, government policies, and cultural attitudes by and large still act as though it is or should be 1950 in middle America." And this, my friends, is why I always say that the traditional productivity rules weren't written for you and why we need to stop working smarter and start working brighter. Another book that I want to talk about is The Body Is Not an Apology: The Power of Radical Self-Love by Sonya Renee Taylor. Workaholism has a different cause for everyone. For me, most of my workaholism, most of my tendencies of trying too hard, capital T ETH was my own internalized ableism. It all came from trying to overcompensate for my lack of self-worth and the way that I was treated around my physical illnesses, my disabilities, my mental illnesses, stuff like that. So while The Body Is Not an Apology isn't specifically about burnout, it was about what was causing the burnout for me. This book just helped me finally accept that my body and brain are not inherently broken or lesser than anyone else's. And I didn't need to spend so much time, effort, attention, energy trying to fix something that wasn't broken in the first place. And this might be your case too if your body or brain isn't what society typically defines as a quote-unquote normal one. Whether you are fat, whether you are visibly disabled, whether you are invisibly ill, whether you are a person of color, there are so many of us for whom our bodies have been othered by society. And this book will help you understand how and why that is BS. This book isn't just about how to feel good or body positivity or something. It helps you actually understand why you feel bad and why that line of thinking is wrong and what we can do instead. My favorite quote from this one is, "Many of us have oriented our entire lives around an effort to be normal, never realizing that normal is not a stationary goal. It keeps moving while we dance a perpetual foxtrot." I normally love dancing, but a perpetual foxtrot sounds dizzying and exhausting. Moving on. The final book that I want to talk about is How to Do Nothing: Resisting the Attention Economy by Jenny Odell. This book looks at rest as a form of resisting the attention economy and capitalism. And dear God, do we need that? There is a reason that this book kept coming up in conversations about productivity and work at the beginning of the pandemic. One of the main points that the book makes is that the internet amplifies the already existing effects of these things like capitalism, consumerism, white supremacy, colonialism. And so it feels so much heavier for each of us individually. And while we can't just shrug it all off and run off to live in the woods, we can take moments to pause and take a break momentarily. Like, instead of running off to live in the woods forever, walking off for a nice few hour-long stroll in the woods instead. It proposes not a life of doing nothing, but of moments here and there of doing nothing, so that when it is time to do something, you're ready for it. And it's also questioning about what nothing and something are in the first place, and questioning productivity in a way that obviously I really love. So my favorite quote from How to Do Nothing is, "The point of doing nothing as I define it isn't to return to work refreshed and ready to be more productive, but rather to question what we currently perceive as productive." And since Work Brighter is all about redefining and rethinking productivity, loved it. So these were all of the books that I read on the beginning of my own journey from working smarter to working brighter, and from hustle culture to brighter balance. And I know that if you're still struggling with workaholism and feeling like you're not working enough or you're not valuable unless you're working, I know these will help you too. You can find the links to all of these in the description below, along with links to join the Work Brighter community. And if you are interested in these books, we are starting something new in the Work Brighter Clubhouse. Next month, we are doing brighter book discussions where Burnout is going to be the first one that we talk about. So if you're interested in all of this, check out the links below and come join us and talk about these books. And if you liked this video, you'll love my other videos on productivity and self-care too. Here are a few to check out next. Bye, and have a brighter week.